welcome to the Silverbird Selection game review. This time around we're looking at a game that's developed by a company that I'm very familiar with, but I'm not actually familiar with this game. The company is Sensible Software. They were responsible for some of my favourite Commodore 64 games, including Whizball, Parallax and Microprose Soccer. They also went on to do Sensible Soccer, obviously, and Cannon Fodder and games like that. This game is one of two that were released by Firebird Software at budget price. It's called Oh No, and it's a Silverbird packaging, as you can see, but this is the Silverbird $2.99 packaging, so we'll be taking a bit of a closer look at that for the first time in this series. The game was released in 1988, so shortly after the release of Whizball and before Microprose Soccer, I think. A pretty uncommon game on eBay. You will see a few copies. They tend to fetch quite a high price, probably because of who the developers of the game were. My copy cost me £3.50 and is in excellent condition. Let's take a look at it now and then load the game up and see how it plays. So as always, let's take a look at the packaging, and as I've just mentioned, this is the Silverbird $2.99 packaging, which I think looks a little bit nicer than the $1.99 packaging. The black and yellow stripes, much more striking I think than the black and purple. As always, you've got the price in the corner, the system information, the Silverbird logo, and a nice image on the front, nice cartoony style. Again, this looks a little bit higher quality than a lot of the covers of the $1.99 games. You can see there's a spaceship in the background there. There's a cow with a space helmet on, and there's some kind of creature trying to seemingly attack that cow and is being attacked by the spaceship. And of course there's cows saying "Oh no," which is obviously the name of the game. Now I have to say, this doesn't really represent the in-game graphics in any way, shape or form, although it does represent the concept of the game. We'll get to that in a moment. The spine has got the Oh No logo, although they've had to change it a little bit to fit on the spine rather than having the words on top of each other there side by side. And on the back, as always with these releases, we've got 4 screenshots, which I know are from the Commodore 64 version because that was the only version that was released. So you can see it's some kind of overhead view shoot 'em up. It's got a map on the right hand side there. Again, the background looks nicer with the black and yellow stripes, I think. And the description of the game says, use extreme force to protect your space cows from marauding mutants. Inside the packaging, it's all pretty familiar. We've got the list of forthcoming Silverbird titles, which, as is now becoming traditional, also includes the game that's the packaging is actually for, Oh No. Something notable about this list though is there's a game on this list which I haven't got on my list of games to get for this collection. That's Futureball. Now I looked this up, did a bit of investigation, and actually it's a game that was never released. So although they advertised it, Firebird never actually released the game, and it's actually an Activision game which Activision themselves never released, and they sort of sold it on to Firebird and they never released it either. There is a page about this game on Games That Weren't, which I shall put a link to in the video description. And so if you want to read a bit more about Futureball and why it wasn't released, then go to that site and have a look. We've also got the usual what do you think about the Silverbird packaging, which is a little bit better as I've been saying, but still not great. And the usual mail order page as well. So let's move on to the instructions. As you can see there, Oh No is copyright Sensible Software. And it says for the game, it's very late in history and the cows are quite an important source of comfort for the people of the galaxy. So much so that rustlers are prepared to risk life and multiple limbs to get their greedy tentacles on them. Each cow is protected in a sphere and you pilot the viciously beweaponed Cattle Ranger's craft Badjak to stop the spheres being snatched. And then you've got how to play the game, which is just a joystick in port 2, controlling the fighter, and you've got to protect the cows through 9 levels of 11 planets. Rustlers start from the sides of the play area, work their way to the nearest cow, pick it up, take it to the edge of the play area where it gets eaten. There's a couple of creatures that enter the area. One of those is a teleporter which will hyperspace you to somewhere else in the game area, and the other is a machine that will deposit another cow if you shoot it, and there are other aliens to whiz around. So it's basically a shoot 'em up, but there's a few intricacies to it, it's fair to say, based on that description. So here we have the loading screen for Oh No, and it's not very impressive looking in terms of there's no graphics. You can see at the top there it says now loading Oh No by Sensible Software. In the middle we've got a very slow scrolling text message which is basically giving you the background for the game and also sort of the instructions of how to play and the different kinds of alien characters that appear in the game and so on. So I'm not going to show all of that. I do think it's a nice touch to give you something to read while the game's loading, but I think it would have been better if they'd also put some graphics on the screen, similar to maybe the graphics on the front cover or something along those lines. If you read through this, it's talking about breeding oxes, fascinating glowing orbs of intense religious significance. And I have to say, if I didn't know better, I would say that the plot of this game is very much Jeff Minter territory, but as we know it's not, it's Sensible Software territory, so we'll see whether the gameplay is more like a Jeff Minter game or more like a Sensible Software game. So here we have the title screen, and it's quite a familiar looking thing from some of the Sensible Software games where you've got quite a familiar looking font, lots of boxes with a sort of metallic sheen around them. They do change colour as it cycles through them. That's the story there, which is barely readable in that dark blue font. But it basically says, in 1 million AD, oxes are very expensive and are guarded against aliens. And now it's skipped onto the high score table. Interesting tune in the background, not spectacular but kind of nice, I would say. So this is the other bit of the instructions. The aliens come in all shapes and sizes. Some picture oxes, some give you bonus oxes, some hyperspace you a bit, and others just bother you. And so basically we'll get to the rest of the plot when we play the game. Or maybe I should just say it first. The plot is essentially protect your herd of oxes from the various things that come and try and take them away, and there's various other aliens to dispatch. That's pretty much it. So let's get on with the game. Okay, so I'm the sort of tear-shaped spaceship flying around. The oxes are these little spheres glowing on the floor. So you can see it's a bit of an abstract view of a herd of cows, to say the least. So there's various aliens, and it's these ones here at the top of the screen right now that take the oxes away and try and take them off the screen. And one's nearly got away with one of them there. So your ship fires bullets, and it also has a boomerang that sort of flies around and tries to zap some of the enemies as well. The enemies come in waves, so if you look in the top right, you can see I'm on zone 4 now. That's wave 4 effectively. And the idea is just to fight off the enemies for as long as possible. Stop them from stealing your oxes, basically. The ship is quite hard to control. The closest control I can say is something like Sinistar, where the joystick changes direction, but the ship's got a bit of inertia, so it takes a second or two, millisecond or two I suppose, to actually change direction. Oh, I've lost 2 of my oxes. I didn't even know when that happened. Okay, we've got a bit of a quiet moment there. I think there's just one enemy left on the screen. There it is, trying to steal another one. Okay, so I'm in zone 9 now, so this is the final zone of each world. There's 9 zones, and I think it said there are 11 planets. Oops. That red square thing, if you shoot that gives you another ox. It's quite hard to shoot though. If you crash into it, you don't get the bonus ox. Now there is a bit of a strategy to this, in as much as sometimes the enemies coming to take the oxes will actually move back towards the middle of the screen, and then if you shoot them you actually get the chance to cluster your oxes together a little bit. It's not that easy to do, to be honest, but there we go, that sort of gives you the idea. So now I've got 2 together, in fact 3 together, all sort of sat in the one bit of the screen, so it's easier to protect them. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next wave now. It doesn't take long for another batch to come along and try and take them, of course. You can't die, you only die when you lose all your oxys, so you can crash into enemies at will. In fact, it's sometimes easier to destroy them by crashing into them than it is by killing them. By shooting them, I should say. So yeah, you do get the chance for a little respite at times, because there's just, if you look on the map, sort of radar on the right hand screen, you can see I'm the white dot. The 3 oxys, you might not be able to see them because of the definition, but the 3 oxys are noted as 3 little blue dots, and there's also an enemy dot kind of wandering across the screen. So until I go and kill that, I've got a bit of a respite, which also gives me a chance to talk about a few things. So graphics wise, it's pretty simple. They're quite small sprites, nicely drawn, not super detailed, but they've got a nice metallic sort of shiny sheen to them, especially some of the enemy sprites. And sound wise, the sounds are very similar to some of the other Sensible Software games, particularly Whizball. There's some familiar sounds from there, and also quite familiar sounds if you ever used the Shoot 'em Up construction kit. Some of the sort of default sounds that came with that were quite similar to these sounds as well. So yeah, it's all quite familiar sort of Sensible Software kind of stuff. I just shot that red thing, so that should give me another ox at some point. Yeah, that's just gone up to 4, although I don't know where the 4th one is right now. It's somewhere on the map. Okay, so I've got 3 of them together and 1 slightly below, and that's just completed the first planet, or was that the second planet? That was the second planet, so I'm on the 3rd planet now. As you can see, the background changes colour, and the backgrounds are a bit psychedelic, to say the least. Which brings me on to something I mentioned while the game was loading, and the fact it sounded a bit like a Jeff Minter game. And to be honest, it looks a bit like a Jeff Minter game as well. Small sprites, frantic action, psychedelic sort of colours and patterns, very Jeff Minter. So this does seem to be Sensible Software's take on a Jeff Minter blast 'em up. Very similar gameplay elements and graphic design as well. So yeah, visually and gameplay wise, very similar to a Llamasoft Jeff Minter game. And of course conceptually with the space cows as well. So you can see it gets more and more frantic as the game progresses, as the levels get further up. Still currently keeping hold of 3 oxys, although one of them's right on the edge of the screen, so if one of the aliens comes and grabs that, I'll struggle to keep hold of it. And there's not really much else to say about the game. It's one of those sort of, it's a pretty basic sort of arcade style blaster, nicely presented, very well programmed. The scrolling's nice and smooth. The difficulty level ramps up pretty quickly in it, which is the sort of thing you'd expect from an arcade game. Lots of enemies flying around. There's enemies that if you hit them, they'll teleport you elsewhere on the screen. There's a few other enemies that don't really do anything other than provide cannon fodder. Oh, I'm going to lose him. Oh yeah, I lost it. I'm down to my last 2 oxys, which are both in the same sort of area. So as long as I can get close to them, I should be able to protect them reasonably well. There we go, that's another planet completed, and the background on this 4th planet, which is called Alpha, is absolutely horrendous. It's really hard to see the enemies on it. They almost seem to be travelling underneath that sort of white lacy grid sort of thing. So we'll see how it goes. So in terms of longevity of wanting to play this game a lot, it's unlikely to be more than a sort of 10 or 15 minute high score challenge at a time. Maybe the sort of thing you play with friends to see if you can get the highest score. It is a budget game, you know, it's a typical sort of budget game. Good on Sensible Software to offer this up as a budget option rather than sell it as a full price game like they were doing with the likes of Whizball and Parallax at the time. Those games have obviously got a lot more depth, but it's definitely got their sort of trademark quality to it. It's nicely presented, good sounds, nice graphics, good gameplay, albeit quite repetitive and simple. So yeah, there's not much more to say really about it other than to see how far I get. I'm not doing too badly at the moment. I mentioned I liken it to Sinistar. The other game I'd liken it to slightly is another Williams arcade game, which is Defender. Just simply because you've got to protect some things on the ground, if you like. and there's lots of things coming to try and grab them and mutate them and whatever, like the you've got the little humans or people to protect in, oh dear, I'm down to my last, yeah, there we go, I was down to my last ox there, and it was right on the edge of the screen, just something just came up and grabbed it. So as you can see, your game over message there says oh no, and that's the end of the game. And I got a superhero of the day high score, 438,000. As I was just saying, a bit similar to Defender conceptually, but not really graphically or anything like that. Also a little bit like Sinistar in terms of the movement of the ship, but otherwise not really like that game either. But look, there's a little snake pops up there, that's quite cool. Yeah, there's a snake charmer on the left there. Nice music on the high score table as well. That's a nice little touch. Those little touches are what make it a little bit better than your sort of average budget game, I suppose, and perhaps why they made this a $2.99 game rather than a $1.99 game. So let's get to the review then. Said enough about the game already. Starting with the packaging, I think the packaging was pretty nice, much better than the other Silverbird packaging. Nice cartoon graphics, or some cartoon image on the front of the packaging, albeit that's really not got much to do with what the game looks like. So I'm going to go 6 out of 10 for the packaging. Presentation is nice, you've got a high score table, music on the title screen, instructions on the title screen as well. Nothing much in the way of options, but that's fair enough, it's an arcade style game. So 7 out of 10 for presentation. Graphics I think are pretty nice. Nothing spectacular, but they've got a nice design to them. Nice metallic sheen, as I said, pretty simplistic but nicely drawn. So 6 out of 10 for the graphics. Same for the sound, 6 out of 10. The music's pretty nice, as I've mentioned, but also the sound effects, pretty repetitive sounding and pretty reminiscent of games like Whizball and other Sensible Software games, but still do the job. So 6 out of 10 for the sound. And finally, playability, as I've said, pretty simple, repetitive sort of concept, but a good high score battle, good high score challenge, and you know, progression throughout the levels increases the difficulty. There's a little bit of risk reward where you can get the aliens to capture your oxes and try and bunch them closer together, so that's quite nice as well. The possibility to earn more oxes as well by shooting the red square alien. So yeah, playability I'm going to go 7 out of 10, all of which gives this a total score of 7.2, which makes it the highest scoring game so far of all the ones I've reviewed, and I think that's deserved. And obviously off the back of all that, I would say it was definitely worth the $2.99 asking price. So yeah, this is not a game I'd ever played before buying it for this series. I'm glad I did. It's a good Sensible Software game, not as good as the likes of Whizball, Parallax and Microprose Soccer, but still a decent entry in their back catalogue and well worth checking out. If you've got any thoughts about Oh No, and you thought it was good or not, then let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time for another game review very soon. Thanks for watching.